A few weeks ago, I did a quiz. Did Jesus say this phrase or this phrase? And one of them was correct, maybe with a few tweaks. And one of them was just a made-up phrase. And to fool you all, I chose really tricky passages that Jesus said. But now it's come back to bite me because some of those phrases are in the passage today. And so now I have to explain them. What was Jesus actually saying when he said this? So we're carrying on through Matthew chapter 10, and I can't turn the page, so I'm just going to read it here. Here we go. Students are not greater than their teacher, and slaves are not greater than their master. Students are to be like their teacher, and slaves are to be like their master. And since I, the master of the household, have been called the prince of demons, the members of my household will be called even worse names. I should have said this is Jesus talking. But don't be afraid of those who threaten you, for the time is coming when everything that is covered will be revealed, and everything that is secret will be made known to all. What I tell you now in the darkness, shout abroad when daybreak comes. What I whisper in your ear, shout from the households for all to hear. Don't be afraid of those who want to kill your body. They cannot touch your soul. Fear only God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell. What is the price of 2 sparrows? 1 copper coin? But not a single sparrow can fall to the ground without your Father knowing it. And the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are more valuable to God than a whole flock of sparrows. Everyone who acknowledges me publicly here on earth, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But everyone who denies me here on earth, I will also deny before my Father in heaven. Don't imagine that I came to bring peace to the earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Your enemies will be right in your own household. If you love your father or mother more than you love me, you are not worthy of being mine. Or if you love your son or daughter more than me, you are not worthy of being mine. If you refuse to take up your cross and follow me, you are not worthy of being mine. And if you cling to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for me, you will find it. This is a confrontational passage. And what I really want to do, if I don't draw up my whole sermon here on the floor, what I want to do is actually pick up some of the overriding themes in here that make sense of some of the trickier passages in here. How can we understand them? And the first bit is really this first passage. A student is not better than the teacher. I'm making lots of mistakes this morning. I need to get my head in the game. Teacher is not better than the student. And here it says a slave is not better than the master. Some scriptures, some translations say a servant is not better than the master. In the Greek, there's no word. It just sort of, a student is not better than the teacher, is not better than the master, fill in the blank. So here we have, first difficult word in here, but really what it's trying to say is you're not better than Jesus. And if Jesus is saying this terrible stuff is going to happen to him, then we need to be prepared for it too, because we should be resembling Jesus. This is the key aspect of the faith. Following Jesus is about resembling Jesus. And if we look like Jesus, then we can expect that the treatment that he got will be ours as well. So how do we end up resembling Jesus? I think a lot of churches try and figure out what is the key message that we're saying here. It's a bit of a movement in America for these mega churches. And if you look at what some of them are teaching, you would think that resembling Jesus meant being successful, being rich, having power and influence in the world, and that you achieve this by striving harder. This is the kind of messaging that they often preach from the front. It's not about grace, unconditional kindness of God. It's about work harder. It's almost indistinguishable from motivational speakers. Tony Robbins with a cross behind him. This is what it means to follow Jesus. This is what it means to resemble Jesus. If you look back through time with our traditional churches, what they would emphasise is being nice, being a good moral person, not being the sort of person that causes trouble, be respectable, be moral, be more successful, be a good church person. Is that what resembling Jesus looks like? I don't think that these people are going to really face hardship particularly. I don't think that somebody who's successful and prosperous and has power is going to face the sort of hardship that Jesus is warning us against. I don't think these people are going to cause friction in their families. You know, no parent is going to look at their nice, well-performing child and say, get out of the house. I don't like what you've devoted your life to. What Jesus is saying is far more radical. You have to resemble me. And how do we do that? An Archbishop of Canterbury, a few archbishops ago, Rowan Williams, talks about this. He talks about how do we resemble Jesus. And what he says is that this is a gift. We have to receive this. And I want to unpack that a little bit more. Archbishop Rowan Williams, I think most notable for his incredible eyebrows, also an incredibly deep thinker. He was replaced by a man called Justin Welby, who's been replaced now by the first ever woman, Sarah Mullally. We talked about her a few weeks ago, but here's my claim to fame. There is Archbishop Rowan Williams. There is a younger version of me with a baby and a pushchair. He is a very kind man, but also an incredibly clever man who's written a whole lot of books. And one of them I want to pick up and talk a little bit about today, Christ on Trial, how the gospel unsettles our judgment. And here is some of the core of how we wrestle with Jesus. Jesus has said these really tricky words. How are we going to respond to them? How do we respond to this call to resemble Jesus? Rowan Williams looks at this topic through the lens of Pilate and Jesus. It's told in 4 of the gospel stories. These are the stories that talk about Jesus. And here Jesus is put on trial. This is what Jesus promised would happen. Suffering would come to him. But Rowan Williams says it's not really Jesus who's put on trial in this. It's us. What does the trial reveal about God, humanity, truth, power and judgment? Rowan Williams' central argument is that in the passion narratives, that's the story of Jesus dying on the cross, it is not ultimately Jesus who is on trial, it is humanity. The gospel stories expose the ways individuals, institutions and societies judge God according to their own assumptions, and in doing so, reveal the distortions of human judgment itself. God has become a human. The creator of all the beauty that we see in this world takes on the form of a human, and what do humans do? We kill him. So here is this challenge. Are we resembling Jesus, even at huge cost? Or are we the crowd yelling, crucify him, crucify him? Here is the challenge that Jesus puts out. It's going to be easier to be in the crowd, to judge Jesus, than it is to follow Jesus or resemble him. As I was pondering this, I thought, you know, when I started reading this passage earlier in the week, I was like, I do not want to preach on this. It's too difficult. I don't want to, I want to be able to water it down. Which translation can I find that's a bit easier on the ears? Is there any way that I can get around this? Because this is so hard to hear. And here I am judging Jesus. Jesus, you are too difficult. I don't want to talk about the things you talked about. I want to talk only about nice things that will make us feel all good. But this is not what we are called to do. How do we engage with Jesus? So in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus is preparing the disciples for this. If they become like Jesus, they're going to be misunderstood. They're going to be judged. They're going to face opposition because the world judges Jesus. The world judges Jesus. They say, get rid of him. And here, sign on the dotted line. Can I borrow your clipboard, Hannah? Come and sign up to follow Jesus. What does that look like in real life? Well, this week I heard initially from someone who's from Auckland who's here this morning. They told me about this situation their church was facing, and then, lo and behold, it was on RNZ. And it's on their website. Came across it on Facebook so I could see all the comments. But here is a situation where the church begins to resemble Jesus, and how does the world respond? The church's plan for low-cost cafe to feed hundreds, shunned by locals. Now, this is being played out in the beautiful Browns Bay. I've never been there, but it looks very pretty. So here's Browns Bay, and here the church from Torbay wants to sell its site, move into Browns Bay, have a cafe that operates as a cafe by day, and then affordable cheap meals at night for people who are struggling. How have the good folk of Browns Bay responded to this? This is from the article. Multiple people discussing it on the community Facebook page were concerned about the type of people free food would attract. Town Centre manager Kim Murdoch said the church's proposal may be best suited outside of the township. She said the church was looking at one specific venue in the centre of town, but the business association had suggested several other locations outside of the township. We wholeheartedly agree with the initiative. We think it's a great thing, and we do acknowledge that there is a need on the North Shore, that there is food deprivation at the moment, definitely in this economic climate. But we don't agree that the building is the correct location or fit for purpose for their purposes. We are trying to help them find suitable premises. Murdoch said the association was willing to assist the church in any way it could. We are fully supportive of their mission. We do think it's for the right reasons. We just don't believe that the centre of Browns Bay is the correct location for it. So here is a whole community of people on the Facebook community page of Brown Bay, up in arms. They've done a survey of the business people in Browns Bay. They don't want that type of people. But anyway, this was on Facebook, the RNZ article. May say something about the people who listen to RNZ, but here is some of the replies. Some people are concerned about what kind of people the free food will attract. You mean the hungry? The very same hungry that Jesus said to feed. I'm not Christian, but even I can see that opening this low-cost cafe is a good Christian thing to do, and being against it because it will attract a certain kind of people is a hateful, anti-Christian mindset. But someone comes back and makes this comment. Sometimes it's tricky running a charity in rich areas. Rich people can feel intimidated by poorer people. They don't feel safe, which is fair enough. A lot of them support schemes like this financially anyway. It can affect property values seriously, like having a train station built by your home. Like a $2 million house with a place you are speaking about operating a couple of doors down the road drops in value by $300,000 to $400,000. Julie replies, I can't tell if this is satire. I hope it is. But Simon says it's called reality. What will it do to your property prices to follow Jesus? I did see this comment, and I know this guy, he's a Christian, and he makes this comment. People are mad when Christians don't do what Jesus taught. People are mad when Christians do what Jesus taught. That Jesus, always causing trouble. Someone should do away with him. So here we are. What does it look like in our everyday, real life? If we are concerned for our house prices, if we are concerned for our success and prosperity, following Jesus doesn't feel good. If we want to resemble Jesus, people are not going to always rise up and call us blessed. There is going to be pushback. The question is, are we going to do it anyway? And this is what Jesus addresses, because he's aware this is going to be tricky for you, but he names why. And he says 3 times, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. At the core of our decision making is fear. What is the core of the fear of the person who's scared their property value is going to drop by $300,000 to $400,000? What is motivating him? What is there deep down underneath? We can see fear drives self-protection, image management, silence and compromise. And this is what we can see being played out. When we're filled with fear, we're asking questions like, what will people think? Will I be accepted? Will I be safe? This is what fear does, and here Jesus comes and tells us, don't be afraid. If you actually look back at the story of Pilate deciding, will Jesus live or die? Pilate doesn't condemn Jesus because he thinks Jesus is guilty. He does it because he's scared. He's full of fear. What are the people going to say? How do I respond to a crowd yelling to kill a man I think is innocent? Fear distorts his judgment. Fear makes us choose safety over truth. The way of Jesus is true. What he calls us to is true. But we become afraid, and so we retreat into our homes and we choose safety. Often if you talk to people, or when I talk to people, and they're not sure about Jesus, they think, it's because I don't have enough faith. I don't know if I really believe it. So we can imagine that our greatest spiritual problem is a lack of faith. Here, Jesus is saying something different. Your greatest spiritual problem is fear. Scared of conflict, scared of rejection, scared of failure, scared of loss, scared of vulnerability. And here's what Jesus is naming. Your parents are going to be afraid for you if you don't choose the path they have chosen. The world will reject you. It's going to end up with conflict and tension. And what does Jesus give as the antidote for this? This promise that you are given an identity by Jesus. You do not need to worry about the identity you are trying to create for yourself. You are a child of God. Jesus reminds the people listening to him by saying this: don't be afraid of those who want to kill your body. They cannot touch your soul. What is the price of 2 sparrows? 1 copper coin? But not a single sparrow can fall to the ground without your Father knowing it. And the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are more valuable to God than a whole flock of sparrows. This is where we're encouraged to find our identity. This is where we can discover who we truly are so we don't need to live in fear. This is, again, to go back to the book, this is what Rowan Williams is trying to say. We don't have to construct an identity. We are given one. He talks, and one of the things that he likes to talk about is we have often crafted an identity like a suit of armour around us. And what we need to do is not construct even more identity and not construct a religious identity. We need to get rid of that construct all around us, dismantle it, and instead see us for what we are, a child of God. We receive our identity from Jesus, who reminds us, you are loved by the Creator of the universe. That is who you are. Someone made in the image of God who is loved. In different generations, I think we are encouraged to construct our identity differently. And the tools that we use to do it are different. I remember when I was a young adult, the way you constructed your identity is to purchase things. So our culture will make these claims, look within yourself, you have to discover yourself, you have to find and craft your own identity, you can create it. And so for me as a young adult, there were different groups, and this is how you signified what your identity was. And one of them was skateboarders. Couldn't find a very good, authentic picture from the 90s. But here it was. You could recognise someone's identity by the shoes that they wore. This is who they were in the world. Does anyone here remember emos? So emos, again, you created your identity. You went and bought your safety pins. You dyed your hair. And again, your shoes. You could be identified. This is the group that I'm part of. And our society says this is how else are you going to find an identity? You have to craft one for yourself. I actually think today it's a little bit more subtle how people find their identities. And I actually think people now are finding their identities online. And in the past week, I don't know how many quizzes I have done to help me figure out what sort of... Has anyone else come across this? There's one, find your feminine style, and this is going to help you identify what sort of woman you are so you know how you should be dressing, because then you're not going to feel uncomfortable in your own clothes. And there's 16 types, and you can do the online quiz, and then you'll find your feminine style. And mine is trousers and shirts, so I'm safe. But it's based on your personality. Personality quizzes have just gone off the chart. You know, Enneagram. Does anyone know the Enneagram type? Oh, not many. That's a good one. Recommend that one. Myers-Briggs personality type. Strength Finder, top 5 strength, high 5. On and on it goes. And just a proliferation. Why does the internet offer us? Because they know that we love it. We can then name our identity. I was making a comment to someone the other week at Guess Who's Coming to Lunch. I was like, sometimes I'm getting a little bit sick of our younger politicians with the new label they come out with. This week I've been diagnosed as ADHD. This week I'm now such and such. But this is the culture. When you go to the doctor and you're like, and this is me, I think I have ADHD, and they're like, you've just watched that on TikTok. No, you don't. That's not fully me, that story, but this is what they're saying that is happening. You know, we're finding our identities online, and it goes, I think, to things that we consider quite precious in our culture. How do you find your gender identity? We can go online, fill in a quiz, and you go, this is how I identify. How do you find your sexual identity? There are a proliferate hundreds and hundreds. Now, I know that's a bit of a shocking thing to say in our world today, but for generations, it didn't happen, but now there's so many choices. Now, I'm not saying that some of these descriptions aren't true. Most of them probably are. But here there is a different description of where we find our true identity. These things can only describe aspects of us. How do we know who we are to the very core of our being? And this is this reminder, who you are is someone loved by God. First and foremost, above anything else, you are loved by God. Jesus says, come and follow me. Receive your true identity. Paul, writing to the church in Corinth, says this: anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone, a new life has begun, and all of this is a gift from God. You don't have to buy your identity. You don't have to do a quiz to find out your identity. Your identity is this: you are made in the image of God. You are called to be like God. You are loved by God. I think the incredible thing is when we begin to realise this, we can then also begin to look across the room, to look across the road, and we realise that those people too are made in the image of God. They are loved by God. And I wonder if the good folk of Browns Bay have realised that people who are hungry are made in the image of God, and they are loved by God, no less than they are. But we become so consumed by fear. Is it enough? Is it enough to just be that in the world? Is it enough to make that my core, my motivation, my being, my identity? Or do I have to go and try and find something somewhere else? Here Jesus reminds us it's enough. It's all you need to know about yourself. Receive this identity. You are a beloved child of God. Let's pray together.